Greetings, salutations, and good evening. Welcome to Expect the Unexpected with Seth Barnatt, your host, me. We're broadcasting to you live from atop Mount Wilson via satellite from London. So this show is a little something different for those of you who may know this evening's mysteries. This evening's mysteries will remain a live on-camera show, but I wanted to try something a little more traditional in the sense of radio, where it's audio only. But it's going to be a free-form sort of program, so like I said, you just never know what to expect. Alright, we have got a great show for you tonight. First off, what do we got? Well, I'm going to share some thoughts with you on a book I just finished reading. And I've also got a recommendation for an excellent film I've seen this week. What else? Oh yeah, we got a couple very interesting stories to share of the extraterrestrial variety. It's all coming at you now, so stay tuned. Well, you may be wondering why we're broadcasting from London, and that's because I have been marooned in London. I've had not 2, not 3, but 4 flights canceled. And while I enjoy being here, it is a little bit concerning. You begin to wonder, will they ever let me go home? So, perhaps the next episode, I'll be back in the San Gabriel Range. We'll see. But we got the generator fired up, ready to go, pumping out the signal, and hopefully it's coming in loud and clear for everybody. So let's get going. Let's get started.
Affirmative.
I'd like to take a moment to share with all of you that I am now back on the most powerful beverage on earth. I took a long break there for a while. I was eating oatmeal for several weeks with blueberries. Oatmeal, oat milk, blueberries. And I was heating the blueberries up in the oatmeal for the last 2 minutes. Soften them up. Just the way they taste in pancakes. No sugar, no anything. Just oat milk, blueberries, oatmeal. Yeah, I got a little tired of that, so I switched back up to the most powerful beverage on earth. And since anyone out there may be a health warrior like me, I'll share the most recent current recipe of the most powerful beverage on earth right now. Get your pen and paper, everybody. Here we go. I ordered some protein on the internet from a UK site of a protein I am familiar with, Garden of Life. Took me a while to find a decent one. I was like, okay, here's one I know, an American one that I'm familiar with. Not that I wouldn't try the British ones, I just am not familiar, so I don't want to take the chance and get something that tastes like chalk. So I ordered this protein, and a couple days after the order was placed, I got a notification saying, your order has been shipped, track it. So finally I go in and check the tracking, and it said something about Kentucky, and I was like, that's weird. I wonder if it's just because that's where the company manufactures this product, because I ordered it on a UK site, and the shipping was free. So I checked the shipping the next day, and sure enough, it was in the United States. It had just gone to whatever international terminal to be shipped, and then a couple days later, it arrived in the customs in the UK, and then however many days later, I think it took like 2 weeks to get the stuff. It finally came from to London from Kentucky. I have no idea why the UK site was ordering products from America, and they didn't necessarily have their own stock. I didn't pay for shipping, so they didn't make any money on that deal. I can't imagine. I paid $25 for the protein. And I've mailed things to London a quarter the weight of this protein, and it costs like $10. So I have the protein in hand, and I'm ready to go. So, and you're probably ready to go waiting with your notebooks. Ingredient number 1, unsweetened oat milk. I mean, you can use any kind of milk you want, but this is my pure health recipe. Unsweetened oat milk, and then I do half to 3/4 of a scoop of the protein because I don't feel like I need the full scoop. It gets a little too thick anyway if you do the full scoop, considering the amount of milk I use. Oat milk, unsweetened. Got the protein of your choice. I do one without sugar. It's the Garden of Life chocolate protein. And then I put in a banana, sometimes room temperature, sometimes frozen. If the bananas get too ripe, I freeze them. Then I put in about a tablespoon of chia seeds. Put in a tablespoon of cacao powder, not cocoa powder, cacao powder, CACAO. And then I put in 8 walnut halves, 1 date. Be sure to take out the pit if you're getting them without the pits removed. I do probably a teaspoon of flaxseed. By the way, did I say I put a tablespoon of chia seeds in cacao powder? I do a teaspoon. Sorry. Scratch that. Teaspoon of chia seeds. Well, you can do a tablespoon of chia seeds. I just kind of eye that one, but I do a teaspoon of cacao powder. 8 walnuts. 1 date. Teaspoon of flax meal. And then I put in maybe 2 spoonfuls-ish of unsweetened, unsalted, plain old straight up peanut butter. Blend it up in the powerful blender. I have myself the most powerful beverage on earth. And I've been looking into this fasting situation. So I've been eating breakfast at like 11, sometimes noon, depending on when I get up. But yeah, might be worth looking into. Apparently there's supposed to be something that's released, like ketones or something, if you fast, because your body goes into this state where it starts to flush out all the damaged cells, and the healthy cells start to bulk up and do their work better, and they're stronger. Apparently there's some science behind this, so I'm just beginning to look into it. Maybe it interests you. You could check it out too. So there you have it. Most powerful beverage on earth. Back on the menu. Okay, everybody, the producers are telling me we have a very important announcement, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Beans and rice, beans and rice. Mama even serves us sometimes twice. But silly as he seems, beans will give you your protein. My good buddy rice is an energy divine. Put us together as a team. We got a flavor that's supreme. Beans and rice, beans and rice. Once or twice or even thrice. Beans and rice is nice.
Welcome back, everybody. That was nice. Gotta remember to eat healthy. So I just finished reading the book Altman on Altman. It's edited by David Thompson. It's a collection of interviews with Robert Altman throughout his career as a director and a filmmaker. It goes through pretty much everything he's done, at least up until 2005 when the book was printed. And I really liked it. It was really interesting for me, and I find it really nice sometimes when you can see these like hugely famous, successful directors and filmmakers saying things and doing things just like how you do them yourself when you're trying to work on a project or make a movie or whatever. And it's like, oh, okay, so they're not so different than me. I'm doing the right thing. But yeah, it was really good. I'd recommend it to anybody who's interested in Robert Altman or filmmaking. But I had actually seen this book at a Christmas party this year, and I picked it up. I saw Altman on the spine. I was like, ooh, I want to check that out. And I read it for about 10, 15 minutes, and I could tell that I would like it when I was just taking that little sample. And I made a note on my phone, and I forgot all about it, and then I was out here in London, and I remembered, so I went online and I ordered a copy, and like I said, I just finished reading it, and I really liked it, and I like to hear about directors that I also feel like I can relate to, and it's often independent directors like Robert Altman or, Agnes Varda or Jim Jarmusch, Richard Linklater, even Stanley Kubrick is, pretty independent in the way he did things. But yeah, so it's nice to like read about the process of some of these directors and sort of kind of gives you some reassurance and motivation, really, I guess. But I really enjoyed that book in kind of a specific way for myself. Aside from getting, a few tips and reassurances, it was constructive for me to read in a different way. I've had an issue for a long time where I compare myself to other artists. And in the past, I'd read a book like this, and when Altman would say, I'm going to make this up, for example, he'd tell an actor, he'd say, I'd never tell an actor to do such a thing, or I would never do that, and this and that. And he'll make an example of how something he would never do, and like a terrible thing if you're making a film is to do this or do that. And then I would start to think, oh God, did I do that when I was making my movie? Did I say something like that when I was filming to the actor? And I'd always be worried that I had done exactly what it is he said, and you'd kind of get this pit in your stomach and this anxiety. And I'd feel like the next time I made something, I had to do it the way that Altman did it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a good director, and I would be phony, or I'd be lying to myself. And I wasn't a filmmaker because I had told an actor or someone that I was working with in the crew something like he said he never would do, and that you'd be crazy to do. And I'd leave a book like that feeling bad about myself, and my confidence would be shot. But I found upon reading a book of this nature this time around, I felt secure in myself, and I didn't have to feel like I needed to copy everything he did, and that it was okay if I had done something that he wouldn't have done, because my confidence was much higher this time around. And it was a challenge for me at the same time. I could feel that voice inside me trying to get me to question myself and my methods, but I was able to stand strong and like hold out against it. And I felt like, well, that's fine if he does it that way. I do it a little differently. And I was actually reading another book by a cinematographer that I really love, Nestor Almendros, before I read Altman, but then I paused, read all of Altman, and then finished the Almendros book, which is called A Man with a Camera. But while I was reading the second half of the Almendros book, he was saying stuff that was like the complete opposite to what Altman's personal beliefs were in filmmaking. And there were two artists right there that I really enjoy who both had great success and believed in totally different viewpoints. So it just reminded me that it's okay to have your own viewpoint and to not be discouraged. But the Nestor book's called A Man with a Camera, in case anybody missed that and you want to look it up. Aaron Meister, the cinematographer of my movie, recommended that book to me, which is another great book if you want some insight into filmmaking. But yeah, I really enjoyed that Robert Altman book, and not just for, entertainment and insight, but because I was experiencing it in a whole new way with a strong confidence in myself, and I left the book feeling really charged up and pumped to work on my next film. And I happen to be writing a script right now, and I think the book has got me making faster progress than I would have had I not read it. Also, I saw in Robert Altman a sense that things were not hugely precious to him, and that he could make a film and not toil and pain over it for months and months, and just labor and be so, compulsive and neurotic. He seemed like he was, what he said was he was just making them for fun and to have a good time, which I totally agree with, but, I lose sight of sometimes. Not to say he doesn't make movies he loves, he always has the final cut. But, he just seems a bit more laid back about the whole process. And so my writing has been coming easier in the past couple of weeks as I'm not being so hard on myself, and I'm not trying to make a masterpiece out of it. Instead, I'm just writing the story in a way that is more enjoyable and fun, which you would think would always be the case, but I get distracted sometimes, and I have all these big expectations for myself, and I feel like I have to make it really incredible. But not to say I want to make it boring, but I do think that if I write in a natural way, in an honest way, then that is the surest path to making something that will be interesting, exciting, and entertaining. I think it's good when the personality of the writer, in a way, comes through subtly, and because I think it makes it a little more relatable and more interesting and more human. So I'm feeling good, you know. I'm writing that script, working away every day, and I don't go crazy on myself if I don't do a huge amount, and just get one thing in the plot figured out, and try to be. I mean, obviously, I want to my nature is just to be like a workaholic and just go all the time, just crazy amount of productivity. But I'm trying to be a little more laid back, a little bit more like Robert Altman's approach. I mean, he obviously worked hard too, but yeah, working on this, trying to write it in a way so that I can shoot it next year. I'm hoping to get this movie to be my next one that I shoot. It's either this one or another one I'm writing. So between one of those two, it's kind of tough to write in a way where you're restricting yourself as far as like the amount of actors and the amount of locations, and trying to make a budget conscious script. It limits the creativity in a way, but at the same time, it's worth it to me if I can afford to make the movie, because otherwise I'm writing this huge thing that I can't really feasibly make into a film. Oh, and really quickly, going back to my comment about Robert Altman being laid back, I don't mean to say that he was not taking his work seriously, and I don't want to give the impression that he was just passive or careless in his filmmaking. He was definitely pouring his heart and his emotions into his films and working really hard all the way through. And I think they're great movies. They're some of my favorites. But, regarding the laid back approach, I just mean that he seemed to be having a good time making his movies, and he didn't get too caught up in being neurotic or worried. And in the book, he said he made movies because it was really fun and enjoyable. And I admire that. I strive to be more relaxed and just have a good time when I'm shooting something. I mean, I really do have a good time when I'm out, like actually physically shooting something. That's when I'm the happiest. And despite the stress and all the crazy amounts of work, I'm still having like a really good time. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But, after reading this book, I find myself in like a calmer state of mind, which has helped me to progress on my script. And I feel more motivated after reading the book, and I feel more secure in myself and my abilities, and therefore I can make good progress with my writing. And so, Robert Altman was working really hard on his movies, but at the same time, he seemed to really be enjoying it. And it just kind of reminded me to, have a good time making your movies, and don't, take yourself too seriously. Just you're doing this because it's creative and it's fun. But in conclusion, on all this Altman book stuff, I would recommend Altman on Altman if you're into movies or movie making in general, or just want to hear something interesting, interesting information on how all the things in filmmaking work, and the Nestor Almendros book, A Man with a Camera. Both great. I'm going to be reading another filmmaking book next. I've been reading a ton of books since I've been here. I'm trying to. I've been doing lots of puzzles, reading lots of books, doing lots of writing. I feel pretty productive in a constructive way. And, on top of the writing and trying to get ready for the next film, I am also trying to complete the film I already shot, of course. But I have come up against a financial barrier at the moment, unfortunately. The sound mix needs to be done next, and it isn't cheap. The mix is going to cost $6,000, so that's a discounted rate, and it's from a highly qualified professional who will do an excellent job. But it is out of my budget range, so I was going to do an Indiegogo for the film, open it back up, and try to raise as much of it as I could, and then whatever I didn't raise, I'd try to front myself the rest of the portion. But right now, since the Budweiser virus is out, I'm not sure if this is the best time to do it. But the sound is such a huge importance to me. I mean, obviously, but most of the projects I've ever done independently have had poor sound quality. So I'm determined to get clean sound on this film. And when I'm back in Los Angeles, I'm going to see actually if I can get some cleaner audio that I could just add in and lay over the existing stuff to make the workload a little bit lighter for the sound mixer. So that's potentially something I can do, which with all this quarantine stuff actually could be a beneficial time to do it since there's not as much traffic out there. I don't know what it's going to be like when I get back, but yeah, so I'm considering even going out and recording some of my own Foley. It's say that word wrong. Is it Foley or Foley? No, Foley. Yeah, I said it right, I guess. But I usually say it wrong. But the sound is one thing I have always had such a hard time with. Despite all the years of trying to get it right and using good equipment and proper methods, it just evades me. I can't figure out how to make good sound. But I really want to finish this film for my own sake as well as to be able to show it. I just want to keep rolling them out, to be honest. I just want to make them more and more, especially after reading that book. I feel like, yes, this is how I want to do it. But, I love each project I make, but once, it comes to a close or you're just about complete, I'm always like ready to jump on to the next one because, you just have more ideas and you just want to keep on going. But in a way, I guess this radio show is helpful so that I can still make something in between the films, something as a creative outlet. But I am so close with this film, so I have to get the mix done, and then once the mix is done, I just have to color time it, and that's it. I'll be done. But the sound has to be good. I have to make it just beautiful and perfect because it's so important. It's so much more immersive because all the other short films and things I've worked on, I've always had, amateur sound, and I've never had anybody be able to mix it because even the source is just no good to start with. And the only thing I guess I ever had great sound was when we did Youth Large, because that was professionally recorded, and Free Money. But it's all the independent stuff I guess I'm referring to, and this film is obviously independent. But rest assured, I will figure out a way to get the money and get this thing sounding beautiful and clean. But yeah, that's where I'm at. Alright, it's time to cut to some announcements. So stay tuned and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Captain O.G. Reedmore here. If you're packing up a picnic or heading for the beach, here's some instant entertainment that's always right in reach. You can hike it, you can bike it, you can sling it on your back, and it's right there where you need it when you're ready to relax. Yes, it's instant entertainment. Any place and any day. So no matter where you're going, don't forget your book, okay?
And welcome back. We're going to get right back into the show. So, after reading the book by Robert Altman, I was obviously in the mood to watch some movies by Robert Altman. I had already seen The Player, and I had already seen The Long Goodbye, and I tried to watch MASH like a long time ago, and I wasn't into it. This was when I was probably 23 or 25. And I found California Split on Amazon, actually. So since we have Prime, it was free. And at the time of this recording, it is still on Amazon. So check it out if you're interested. But yeah, it's called California Split. Robert Altman film. It's from 1974. Elliot Gould and George Siegel. Those are the two main actors. But yeah, I really love this movie because it's just one of those movies that is kind of meandering and a little bit plotless, really. I mean, there is a little bit of a story going on, but it's pretty light. And I love that kind of stuff, which you actually may know if you've ever seen any of my short films, or you may learn if you ever see my feature. Same kind of, meandering sort of occurrences. That kind of stuff really appeals to me. I think it's because it feels very like slice of life, it feels kind of real, but then there's this element of fiction to it that you do have control over it, but it also feels realistic. So at the same time, it's easy to imagine it happening in real life, and it's kind of like a fantasy escape sort of method for me anyway. But it was a really good movie, and I highly recommend it if you feel like checking something out by Robert Altman. I was also going to say that there are elements of it, because I think I have been in England for so long that seeing a movie in America is a little bit appealing to me, because it's like, oh, I remember that kind of stuff. And also it's from 1974, so they're doing things like writing things with pens on paper and using payphones and paying with cash and taking buses, so that kind of stuff feels nostalgic for me. So a little bit of a sucker for that kind of thing sometimes. And the whole movie is basically centered around these two guys, the two main characters, gambling. And I've never done much gambling in my life, but I've done a little tiny bit. And something about gambling is so appealing, obviously, because the idea that you could go play a game of cards or roll some dice or, pick a number for the roulette wheel and potentially win an exorbitant amount of money. I mean, the odds are entirely stacked against you, but just that idea that it is a possibility is enough for me sometimes to be like, well, it's possible. Why not it be on my turn that number comes up? So anyway, watching a movie about gambling is a little bit addictive in itself. Not that I have a gambling problem, but I might if I actually allow myself to gamble very much. Good thing I don't know how to play poker. But yeah, so it's kind of a little bit suspenseful, or in a way, there's there's some suspense in the movie as far as like the gambling goes. So yeah, I think you'll have a good time. Check it out, California Split. And before we move on, I'm going to read you a little excerpt from the Altman book. Something kind of interesting, just to give you an idea of the greed of the major movie studios. The interviewer asks, I understand even the U.S. forces were eventually allowed to see the film. Such was the excitement surrounding it. It won the Palme d'Or at the 1970 Cannes Film Festival, and it went on to be one of the 3 top-grossing Hollywood films of the year. According to Variety, it grossed over $70 million in the U.S. This was in 1970, so $70 million back then was a lot. Ingo Preminger and Fox did very well out of the film's success. What did you make out of it? The guy asks. And then Altman says, I got $75,000 for doing MASH, and they were supposed to give me a percentage of the profits, but they never did. If you consider the spin-off of the TV series, that picture made $1 billion for Fox. They didn't approach me about the series, and I wouldn't have done it anyway. So there you go. There's Fox Studios for you. They made $1 billion off of something he made, and he got $75,000 for his own. So, stick to independent filmmaking, everybody. Let's see, maybe I'll get one from California Split, since I was talking so much about that movie too. Let's see, this was kind of interesting. Give you a little idea of what the book's like. It says, the interviewer asks, the film's depiction of gambling situations certainly feels very authentic, but then you, Joe Walsh, and Elliot Gould all gambled a lot, and many of the people we see in the games were actual players. I gather most of the extras in the casino were from an organization of ex-addicts. Then Altman says, normally the audience sees gambling set up more dramatically, and what you have in California Split is the stuff you really see in those casinos. The poker club in the opening scene was a set built by Leon Erickson in some dance hall, and we just set up these gambling situations and filmed them happening. None of the players' stuff was scripted. I think this film had the least amount of plot in it of any of my films until more recent times. It's about character, and that was the fun of it, getting into these people. George brought attention into it because, in a funny way, he was way over his head. So, that's kind of funny. The least plot of any of his movies until that time. And then further on, he had even less plot. But, yeah, it's kind of a very, real look at gambling, and it feels authentic, and it's good. You guys should check it out. I mentioned The Player earlier by Robert Altman, and I really loved that movie when I first saw it. And one of the scenes that stuck with me after I'd seen that forever, and I think about it all the time still, is Tim Robbins calls Greta Scottkey, I believe that's how you say her last name, on the phone, and the audio is just so beautiful. I love the way that it sounds. It's like that old landline receiver speaker quality, and it's always stuck with me. I love that scene. So I figured, why not share it with the audience tonight? So here is that scene from The Player by Robert Altman.
Yes, hello. Is David Kahane there, please?
David! Dave!
Hello, I'm really sorry, I forgot. He's gone out.
Oh, I see.
Who's this?
This is Griffin Mill.
Oh, the dead man.
What did you just say?
Oh, nothing.
About me being a dead man.
Just, a nickname David has for you.
Oh, I see. That's a funny nickname. So I suppose your husband doesn't like me very much.
I don't have a husband.
I suppose David doesn't like me very much.
David's, gone to the cinema.
When will he be back?
Film's over, I presume.
And you are?
June.
June.
Here we go. You want to know my last name? Well, you won't be able to pronounce it. No one can.
Try me.
Goodman's daughter.
Goodman's daughter.
Goodman's daughter.
Goodman's daughter. How's that?
Hey, very good.
Thanks. What do people usually say?
Oh, don't ask. Like anything from good dog's water to goulash wallop.
You English?
Yeah. Well, no, not really.
Well, where are you kind of sort of not from?
Well, do you want the long story or the short one?
The long
No, you'd never believe it. The short one's Iceland.
one. Iceland? No, anyone came from Iceland. It was just a block of ice.
It's very green, actually.
Really? I thought that was Greenland.
No, Greenland's very icy. Iceland's very green. They switched names to false Vikings who tried to steal their women.
Oh, I see.
No. Blue Sea.
Red Sea.
No. No red.
You're a painter.
How did you guess?
So what movie did David go to see?
He went to the Rialto in Pasadena. He always goes there.
What showing?
Bicycle Thief, I think.
It's a good movie. Have you seen it?
No, I don't go to the movies.
You don't. Why not?
Oh. Life's too short. I've got to hang up now.
Oh yeah, I love it. One of my favorites. I just love that audio quality that they capture so perfectly from the old receivers. I miss that sound. Even now, it doesn't quite sound exactly the same unless you have an old phone. But, yeah. There you have it. Beautiful audio. Something that I am seeking and striving for in my film. You can see why it's so important to get good audio. It's so immersive. Okay, everybody, hang tight. We got a few announcements coming at you, so we'll be right back after these messages.
Somewhere out there, someone needs Dr. Henry's emergency lessons for people. Dudley Spiffington is dazzling on the courts, not with his game, with his whiter than whites.
Some dazzling white tennis balls, please. Oh, my finger! Oh, my white!
First, be calm and calm him down.
Okay?
Now, look at the blood. It's not so bad. It washes dirt out and helps heal the cut by clotting. This cut is bleeding quite a bit, so press down with a clean cloth, hold several minutes, and don't keep looking underneath. This is direct pressure and should stop the bleeding. Now, wash it gently and wrap it in a sterile dressing. If a cut keeps bleeding or is deep, keep up the pressure and get to a doctor right away.
That Dudley, what a dud.
Hey, kid, have a carrot. A carrot? Carrot sticks are yes, indeed. They are delicious. If you must eat in between meals, why not eat nutritious dishes? Like fill a bowl with ice cubes and add raw cauliflower. Stuff celery with cheese and let it chill for half an hour. Add carrot sticks and olives and any other knickknacks. Then keep this by the TV set for when you want those quick snacks. Well,
But while I'm waiting, could you make me a banana?
okay, you're a banana.
And welcome back. It's always nice to hear a good piece of advice. Thanks to the producers for putting that up. Well, in other news, my girlfriend and I have been doing lots of puzzles. My friend Paul has been as well, and I saw he was doing them a month ago or so, and I was like, that's pretty appealing. I hadn't done a puzzle in forever, but especially when I had been locked up in quarantine, I thought, oh, puzzle sounds nice. But I'm not sure about in the U.S., but in London, we have had a fairly strict lockdown, and we're only allowed to go outside once a day to take a walk, or if you have to go to the market. It's just for an essential thing. Exercise for the walk or getting food. And otherwise, we're in the dang house. And we can only go to nearby places too. Like, we can only go to the market that's nearest to us, or to the park that's close to us. And it's 3 parks, and there's 2 that are pretty big, but the other one's small, so it definitely gets boring after a while. And I mean, nothing. It's open. It's just markets and pharmacies, so it's really boring. So the idea of a puzzle seemed pretty dang entertaining to me. And I went online to order some, and it was actually really hard to find good ones because tons of them were sold out. I think everyone else had had the same idea to do puzzles. And I found 2 Where's Waldo puzzles, but they were only 250-piece puzzles. They weren't like huge, and they didn't take terribly long. But we ordered them, and I had never been so excited for a puzzle in all my life. Finally, whenever it showed up, I can't remember how long it took, but I had actually thought of getting like a Nintendo Switch or some kind of like PlayStation thing or something, but for one, my girlfriend doesn't have a TV, and on top of that, all those kinds of purchases, when I looked, have been banned right now. Amazon, for example, I don't know about other websites, but Amazon won't sell like video games or anything because it's not essential. But resorted to the puzzle, so after about 5 days, I think it showed up, and we did it. We did both of them in about like 4 days. And the reason I'm bringing up this was that I wondered if it was good for my brain to work on a puzzle, and I figured it must require some kind of strategic thinking and brain exercise in a way. And also, she and I do them without looking at the cover, so without the image, because it makes it much harder, especially with the Waldo ones. And I think I do that partially because I just want it to last longer. It's stretching out the fun. But it definitely is more challenging that way. I figured it's working your brain more. And then we ordered 2 more after that. One I actually surprised her with that she didn't know was coming. Is a Frida, what's her name? Frida Kahlo? Frida Kahlo. I'm pretty sure she's Mexican, the Mexican artist. I ordered that for her, and that was 1,000-piece. And I also ordered a 1,000-piece Waldo, which was like a huge one. And we actually streamed doing the Waldo puzzle, but it took us 5 days. But I think that's partially because we were doing it on the stream, so it's like slower. You're not paying as much attention and doing it as quickly. But I like that it lasted longer. So I feel like, my recreations are fairly good for my brain right now between, the puzzles, and when I'm not doing the puzzles, I'm reading books, and if I'm not reading, I'm trying to work and write on my script. So I feel like I'm exercising my brain. It got me curious and still wondering, like, is it helping me? So I looked up some quick facts about doing puzzles, and I'm going to read a few of them out to you now. It says here, it improves your memory and helps reinforce existing context between our brain cells. It also increases the generation of new relationships. I think it's referring to in your brain. This in turn improves mental speed and thought processes. Jigsaw puzzles are especially good for improving short-term memory. It also said that it can lower stress levels, so that's a good thing. So the tip of the week, do a puzzle, and it'll be good for you some way or other. I'm also working out 3 days a week right now. Not like crazy bodybuilding stuff or anything. I'm doing like calisthenics and body weight stuff, push-ups and squats and sit-ups and pull-ups, Pilates kind of stuff as well, and cardio. And although my pinky is going in and out of subtle numbness lately, which I'm wondering if it's due to doing too many pull-ups, So I'm holding off on doing the pull-ups right now because I actually did feel like a weird feeling when I was doing some in my right elbow. And it felt like I kind of almost injured myself. I think there's a nerve that I had read that goes from like your neck down to your pinky and half of your ring finger, and it goes through your elbow. And I think maybe I might have like pinched it or something. But yeah, anyway, I'm working out. But the working out has definitely helped me stop craving as much sugar, which I love. Uh, Not craving it is what I love. When I eat too much sugar, I'm just not like as clear-headed, and I just don't feel as good, and I'm not as energetic. It's also good for my back, I think, because sugar is an inflammatory, I think is what you call it. So it makes your cells and everything like kind of get inflamed, and I think that adds stiffness to my back because it's inflaming my tissue and my discs and whatever else is down there. So all in all, I just think working out is definitely improving my life, and I think it's also strengthening my core when I'm doing these sort of Pilates and body weight workouts, and it's helping my flexibility. So really, I mean, this quarantine has kind of had its hidden benefits for me. I'm reading more, and I'm writing better, and I'm working out, and I'm eating better than I ever have since Helen loves to cook. I'm getting such a nice variety of fruit and vegetables since her meals are always so varied and fresh. And speaking of food, there are these amazing banana chips that I love that they sell out here in London. I can't get them in America, but since they're in short supply, Helen and I have been having a hard time getting them in the store. And they carry them in places we can't walk to, so since we're not allowed to go far and to ride public transportation, we can't really get our hands on them. But she went online and ordered them from the site directly, and the brand is called Tropical Whole Foods. It has nothing to do with Whole Foods Market. It's a place from Uganda, Tropical Whole Foods, and they do like mango and banana stuff. They do a bunch of different kind of fruits and stuff. I think they do dates too. They're not hard like you might think of as I do from America, like a hard banana chip. These are really soft and they're chewy, and there's nothing added to them. There's no sugar, there's no sulfates or any of that crap. They're just like raw bananas, and they dry them in the sun, and they're so good. But she ordered some on their website, but I didn't see them when they arrived, and she had like put them in her room, but she had bought 4 bags, and like every day she'd bring out another bag. I'm like, how many you got in there? And so finally, we ate those, but she was kind of like being precious with them because she didn't want to use them all up because it took like 3 weeks to get them here, and it's really hard to get a hold of them, and we both like them, so she was kind of rationing them out. And then I got my stimulus check, so I decided to get myself a gift, or I guess the two of us really, and I bought 8 bags of the banana chips, and then I bought a huge 2 kilogram, which is like 5 pounds, I think, of another variety. They have 2 different versions. They cut them like slices or they cut them like in big chunks. And I ordered that huge bag as well. And I surprised her. I played the Banana Boat song and I danced around the room and I had them in a bag. She couldn't see them. And I kept throwing them out one at a time after another. So now we got a nice, good supply. I'm actually like, gosh, I might even be halfway through that bag at this point, the big one. But I have been chowing down, unrestricted. Now I don't need to be so careful about our rationing. So check them out. It's called Tropical Whole Foods. It's a small company too. They're from Uganda. I don't think you can get them if you're in America, but if you're in Europe and listening, check them out. That has been my gift to myself. That and the puzzles. Now, I imagine you all like to hear a good alien abduction story as much as I do. So I've got a couple good ones for you tonight. These events took place in England in 1980. Some of you may be familiar with one or both of these incidents, but for those of you who don't know, I think you'll find them pretty interesting. Okay, so before we get into the stories real quick, I want to tell you about a piece of music I heard on a late-night BBC radio show a few weeks ago, and that is the Todd Morden Abduction Themes by Sam A. McLaughlin. Now, this piece of music, or these pieces of music, were inspired by the real-life events of the Todd Morton abductions, which I was unaware of. So through hearing this music, I did some research into what this was all about, and then it led me to a secondary story, which is the Zygmunt Adamski, or Adamski, I don't know how to say his name right, abduction story. So first we're going to talk about Zygmunt, and then we're going to move on to the Todd Morton stuff. So some of you may be familiar with the Todd Morton, but first we're going to talk about Zygmunt. But I figured it would be cool to play the themes as sort of a score to the stories. So here we go. Now, first off, Zygmunt Adamski was born in Poland, and he moved to England in 1951. And he lived in Tingley, Tingley, with his wife Leocadia. And his wife had multiple sclerosis and was in a wheelchair. And now, where this story starts off is June 6th, 1980. Zygmunt's cousin and her son were staying with him and his wife for a wedding that was taking place for his goddaughter the next day. And Zygmunt went out shopping with his cousin's son that afternoon. And then they returned home. They all had lunch together, the whole family. And then around 3:30 p.m., Zygmunt left to go grocery shopping. And on the way to the market, he stopped briefly and said hello to one of his neighbors. And this neighbor was the last person to see Zygmunt before he went missing for 5 days. Now, from all accounts, he was a loving husband. He always took care of his wife, given her condition. So it was really unusual for him to leave his wife to fend for herself since she was in a wheelchair. So when Zygmunt didn't come home that night, the family called the police and reported him missing. And then 5 days later, on June 11th, his body turned up in a gated, locked coal yard in the town of Todd Morton, which was about 20 miles away from Zygmunt's home. And for all you people who don't know how to say that, as I don't, the town is called Todmorden. But yeah, so his body showed up in Todd Morton 5 days later, 20 miles from his home. And his body was found on top of a 12-foot pile of coal. And he was discovered by a coal worker in the coal yard who called the police and an ambulance. And the coal worker wasn't sure if the man was alive or not, so he didn't approach the body. And when the police arrived, one of them climbed up the pile of coal and they looked him over and they confirmed that he was deceased. So he was dead, but his body was on top of this pile of coal, and his clothes were clean. So it was indicating that he hadn't been sleeping outside or, in the streets for the past 5 days. Now, weirdly, his shirt was missing, and he had on only a string vest, which is a British term for a mesh netted sort of a tank top, an undershirt. I had to look that up. And his pants were not buttoned properly, and his wallet was missing, and his watch was missing, and his shoes were not tied properly. And then another interesting fact was that he had only 1 day of beard growth, but he had been missing for 5 days. But the strangest thing of all was that they found multiple burn marks on his back and his shoulders and the back of his neck. And the burns had some type of greenish colored ointment or lotion on them. And when the forensic scientists and toxicologists tested the ointment, they were unable to identify it. They never could figure out what it was. And the burns were said to have been well-defined contact burns, meaning that something hot had touched his skin, as opposed to being too near a flame, for example. And the autopsy was done that same day, and which concluded the time of his death was between 11 a.m. and 1 p.m. that day. And the coal worker who had found him in the yard had just left right around 11 and came back, I think they said like an hour later, or it was only like an hour or 45-minute gap between when he left and came back. And he had driven past that pile of coal that they found Zygmunt's body on shortly before, and he hadn't seen it. So it was a very small gap between when the guy was gone and came back and when Zygmunt had turned up. And they also determined that the burns were about 2 days old on his body. And it took several months for the coroners to finally decide what had caused his death, and they ruled that it had been a heart attack. And it was just really weird because he wasn't unhealthy, he wasn't a heavy drinker, he didn't use drugs. So it just was like, why did he have a heart attack? I don't get it. And then also the coroner had said that he had been eating regularly and was not dehydrated. So he'd been getting his meals. And to this day, the case is still open. They never figured out how he got the burns or what that strange ointment was. And they never figured out how he got on top of that 12-foot pile of coal in the locked yard. And another weird thing about this whole case is one of the police officers had noted that there were no signs of footprints leading up the pile when they found the body. So it left them wondering how it had gotten up there. And there were no bruises or cuts of any kind or any signs of struggle on Zygmunt's body as well, just those burns. So they didn't understand how he could have gotten up this 12-foot pile without leaving footprints or tracks or evidence. Because, you climb up a pile of rocks or anything, because the coal was small pieces, like the size of like walnuts or maybe a little bit bigger, but it was, something when you walk up a thing like that, you leave an impression, you step on it and it sinks. But there was no track of any kind, and he hadn't had any cuts or anything on him, and his clothes were really clean, so it didn't appear that he had been dragged up this pile. Even if he had, if you dragged a 180-pound body up this pile of coal or even a pile of dirt or whatever, you'd be digging your feet in heavy and you'd be making marks to get up to the top. So there'd be some evidence that someone had been climbing on the pile, but there was just nothing. It was just completely smooth, and it looked like it had just been dumped out by the truck. Now, given the fact that there was no trace of the body being carried up the coal pile or any footprints from him potentially before he had died, and the coal worker was only gone briefly, the place was locked up and gated, and the ointment couldn't be identified as anything earthly, and he had been gone for 5 days, and he had 1 day's beard growth, so many people believe this was an abduction case, and the body was deposited on the coal pile. Alright, so here is the weird connection between the two stories. So, remember the police officer that went up the pile of coal to identify Zygmunt's body and confirm that he was dead? That police officer's name was Alan Godfrey, and some of you may be familiar with the Alan Godfrey Todd Morden story, but here we go. So, Alan Godfrey, when he saw Zygmunt's body, he had been quoted as saying in an interview, he had a terrifying expression on his face, as if what he had last seen scared him terribly. So a lot of people believe that Zygmunt had been abducted by aliens, and it just terrified him so much that whatever happened to him, that he had a heart attack, and that's what killed him. Okay, so now we have Alan Godfrey, the police officer. Cut to 5 months later, in the town of Todmorden, the same place that he found Zygmunt's body on the coal. He is on patrol, and it's 5 a.m., it's still dark out. He gets a call from headquarters telling him to go check out some cattle that have gotten loose. So he's driving over, and straight ahead on the road, he sees a light, something blocking the road. So he pulls up and he parks in front, and he finds this big craft floating 5 feet off the ground. And he said that there were lights on the bottom, and the bottom portion was also like rotating, spinning around. The top portion was stationary, and he said it was about 20 feet wide and about 14 feet tall. And he picks up his radio, and he's trying to call in some backup, and the radio won't work. So then he picks up, I guess it's another type of a radio, and he tries to call into headquarters, as opposed to, I think he was trying to call out to some of the other officers in the area. But he picks up the phone thing in the patrol car to call back to headquarters, and that's all staticky, and that's all cut out, so he can't get a hold of anybody. So he just grabs his clipboard and he starts sketching out this craft that he's seen in front of him. He said it was silent, it was just floating right there over the ground. And he, I was gonna say, you can check out some of the sketches. I think you can find them online, some of what he drew. And so he's drawing this thing in the notebook, and then the next thing he knows, he's just driving down the road again. So then he looks back, and the craft is gone because it is behind where he would be at this moment because he's continuing down the road. So the next thing he does is he just goes and finds another officer, picks this guy up, and he races back to where the UFO was, and it's obviously no longer there because wasn't there when he was driving away. But he pulls up to this place, and him and the guy get out, and there's broken tree branches, and there's like leaves strewn all around, as if something had been there stirring things up. And they touched the ground, and the ground, like underneath where the craft had been, was still hot to the touch. So they thought, like, okay, this thing is probably somewhere in the area, not really fully knowing what he had just seen. And there's an adjoining park across the street, but it's all gated and fenced off, and it was locked. So they climb over the gate, and they go walk through this park to try to find this craft. And in the middle of the rugby field is a cow, and the ground was soft and muddy, and there were no footprints leading up to this cow. And these guys are walking in, and they're like sinking in the mud, and here's this cow standing right in the middle of this rugby field. For one, it didn't leave any footprints, and two, the whole park is fenced off, so they don't know how the cow got in there. And Alan Godfrey just saw it as like, was the thing just dropped down here in the middle of the field? So there's that weird portion of the story as well. And so after this happens, they leave the field, and I don't know what the other officer did, but he's driving around, and suddenly he realizes that there's 25 to 30 minutes of missing time for him. So he has no idea what happened. It's a blank for him. It's just black. He has no memory of what happened between him drawing on his clipboard the sketch that he made to when he is driving down the road beyond where he made the sighting. And so at some point they hear his story, and people talking about it, and at one point another UFO investigative person convinces him to go see a hypnotist. So they take him to this session, and he gets hypnotized, and it's actually recorded. You can see portions of it online. And in the session, he describes being on some kind of a table, like an examination table, and there's a being standing over him with like a light bulb shaped head, and then in the back along the wall, he said there was like 5 or 6 robots like kind of observing what was going on. And that's kind of all there was that I gathered from my research as far as like a description of the abduction experience. But he does go on record saying, like, I don't know exactly what happened, if that hypnosis session, like, if it was accurate or what that information came from. It's like, I don't actually remember the session, but he said, like, it is, like, sure as day, no one in the whole world convinced him otherwise. He 100% saw that UFO. He was in sound mind, and the thing was floating over the ground. He remembers the size and everything, so like he is just like totally sure of what he saw, and he doesn't seem like a nut. He's not like kind of one of these wacky guys that looks like he's going for attention. And I kind of think he kind of dropped out of like the whole thing after a while because he probably got overwhelmed. But he did write a book too. It was called Who or What Are They? I don't know if you can get this book online or where, but I did see it like mentioned on Amazon. I just don't know if it was actually available for purchase. So what's also interesting is that there have been 5 other separate eyewitnesses that night of a UFO in the same area, and 3 of which were from police, not including Alan and the other officer that he went back to the site with. One of the other people, not one of the police, but just a civilian, was named Leonard Smith, and he reported seeing a flying object in the distance, which turned out to be right in the same area where Godfrey's experience took place, which he had no idea of at the time. And he said it shot across the valley 4 times back and forth, then vanished over the hills, which was in the direction of where Alan had seen it in the road. And there were also 3 police officers who were searching a moor area for stolen motorcycles. And one of the officers' names was John Porter, and he said he saw a cold steel blue light approach them, and it was hovering above them, and he said it flew approximately 12 miles in just 1 second, and it flew off toward Todd Morton. Now, I find this Alan Godfrey occurrence fairly convincing, as there were so many other eyewitnesses, and that helps the story's credibility for sure. And I am open to alien visitation. Whether or not they allow themselves to be seen, I'm not sure, but I firmly believe that there are other intelligent life forms out there, 100%. So, given the almost uncountable amount of stars, and the billions of which that have solar systems, and within those solar systems they have habitable zones like Earth for their planets, I'm in firm belief that there are intelligent life forms out there, and I think that science also agrees. So, was Zygmunt Adamski abducted by aliens? And did Alan Godfrey witness an extraterrestrial UFO? You be the judge. While we're listening to eerie music, here's something from The Caretaker. It's from the album An Empty Abyss Beyond This World, and the track's titled All You Are Going to Want to Do Is Get Back There. That's a pretty big mouthful. Check it out. That song actually was inspired by the haunted ballroom scene in Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, another movie I love, and perhaps we can talk about that sometime as well. But for now, the show has to come to a close. Our little Honda generator running the power for the radio studio on top of Mount Wilson is about to run out of gas, so that means it's time to sign off. So thank you all for tuning in to this edition of Expect the Unexpected with Seth Barnatt. Looking forward to catching up with you next time. Take care, and remember, water your plants.